Welcome to the Money Over 50 podcast, brought to you by Dallas Davison and Michael Hogue from Money Over 50 Financial Advisors. This information is general in nature and does not take into account your objectives, financial situation, or needs. Therefore, you should consider whether the information is appropriate for you and your personal circumstances. If you require personal advice, please contact Money Over 50 Financial Advisors. Here are your hosts, Dallas Davison and Michael Hogue.
Welcome to Money Over 50. Today's topic, owning versus lending. Thanks, Michael.
So, Dallas, since the dawn of time, companies have been able to borrow money, take that money, add value to a service or product, charge a premium to that service or product, sell that, and make a profit.
Yeah.
And when I said the dawn of time, we'll go back to at least 1602. So the first publicly listed company ever known worldwide was the Dutch East India Company. Probably a good one to use as an example. They at the time of their incorporation, they borrowed some money, and from the people that they borrowed money for, they struck an agreed interest rate.
Yep.
They paid that rate of interest, and then they paid them back their principal.
Yep.
So they were the lenders.
Yep.
And additionally, they issued some shares. So other people chose to actually invest into that company and be a part owner of that company. Mm-hmm. Now those second group of people, the owners of the Dutch East India Company, were able to benefit in the profits of that company. Now, of course, there are risks involved there, because if the Dutch East India Company fell over, then obviously
the lenders get paid back.
The lenders get paid back first.
Yeah.
Now they may not get all of their money back.
Yeah.
The owners are the last to receive that money back. So there is risk. Now that risk can be minimised, of course. And when I said since the dawn of time, we're going back to 1602. I'm sure there was a blacksmith somewhere before that borrowed a sum of money from somewhere in the village, and added a value to something, charged a premium for that, and were able to make a profit. So companies have always been able to borrow money throughout history, and they've needed to be able to borrow money in order to actually get up and running. Of course, they also, generally speaking, when a company grows, they'll issue shares to new shareholders to also get some money into that company and grow the value of that company, or to grow that company, to give them the capital, the working capital. So there's two ways that you can actually do this, and you can be an owner or a lender. And you've hit the ground running 90 seconds in, and I haven't shut up.
We've gone from the dawn of time to our modern capitalist system. I love it. I love when you start a podcast with something like "since the dawn of time," because they go, "Here we go. This will be good." This is like Ali, who's our offsider here at Money Over 50, often gives me a hard time, because when we're having a coffee, if I go to say something and it's just an opinion that I've got, I'll often say, "I've got a theory." He goes, you don't have a theory. You're not some scientist. You've just got some harebrained idea. So I love the way if you start with "since the dawn of time," it implies, wow, this is amazing.
I may have embellished it a little bit, but like I said, there are records going back as far as 1602.
Yeah. So,
and I'm sure there was a blacksmith or two before that, or a farmer here or there that borrowed money.
Absolutely.
To be able to have enough working capital to add value to something.
Yeah.
Sell it for a profit,
yep.
and therefore make a profit and pay back the lender.
I think the point that you make, and I've taken your title or your theory here, and it's made me think kind of in a different way, but it's very similar. Is that it's easy to lose sight of the fact that this is the choice that we have. So if you go to work and you earn some money and you've got some money sitting in your bank account, you have a choice. And NAB, as the example here, is you've gone back to the dawn of time and used the Dutch East India Company. So I'm going to make it a modern-day fable. So you've saved $10,000 in your bank account. Now, you have a choice. You can either lend that money to NAB, by sitting it in your bank account. And this is, I guess, the point when we're talking about owning versus lending. It doesn't even feel like that's what we're actually doing, but that's what's going on right now. If I've got $10,000 in my NAB bank account, NAB is paying me, admittedly, a very, very small interest rate at the moment, but they are paying me a small interest rate. They're taking that money, they're on-lending that to other people. That's essentially what's happening there. Is I'm lending that money to NAB, NAB's lending that money onto other business owners or someone who wants to buy a property or someone who wants to use that money in some productive capacity. So that's I guess the first part of it, is that if you have money in a bank account, you are choosing to be a lender. It doesn't feel like it, because it's not the same as, someone coming to you and you saying, I'll lend you this money at a 5% interest rate and you pay me back over this many years. But that's what goes on every time you have money in a bank account or in a term deposit or something like that, is that you're choosing to be to that enterprise. Now, alternatively, you could take that $10,000 and you could go and buy shares in the company NAB. So, and again, as I say, every time I talk about an individual company, I'm not saying that's what you should do, but you can, even that, when you buy shares in NAB, you are choosing to be an owner of that business or of that company. And it doesn't feel like it, because it's sort of just a bit of a paper transaction, and it doesn't feel like being the owner of a business in the same way that if you run a corner store and you own that business, you can see how that business is transacting and making money day to day. But if you've chosen to buy shares in that company, you are a part owner of that company. So that's I guess, in our modern day terms, the same choice. You can either leave that money in your bank account or put it in a term deposit and lend that money to NAB, or you can take that money, you can buy shares in NAB. And this is, I think, the point that you're making, is that if I lend that money to NAB or the equivalent, or do something like that, I get a rate of interest. I get and again, at the moment it's very low, but I get that guaranteed return.
Yep.
And obviously the more guaranteed that return is, the lower the rate is. So NAB's going to pay me 0.1% interest on that money that's sitting in a bank account that I can access at any time. Whereas if my mate wants to go and start some new business and wants to borrow money off me to do that, and he's got no collateral, he's going to need to he's going to need to pay a lot more in interest. But I've capped the amount of return that I can get on that. I can never get more than the agreed upon rate of interest. NAB don't turn around in 10 years' time and say, hey, thanks so much for letting us borrow that $10,000 and on lending that. Here's all the great companies that were started with that money. You actually, we've kept some of those companies. You now own them. That's not how it works. You've made a bargain. You get that return. You get that. It's a very low return. That's what you get, and that's all you get. Whereas, if I choose to be an owner, so rather than being a lender and saying, well, I'll take my 0.5% interest or 0.1% interest, I'll choose to be an owner in these companies. You are choosing to take on more risk, and you are choosing to take on more volatility. As you say, if that NAB goes bankrupt, I'm going to lose my money before the depositors in NAB. They're going to get their money back before me. But if in 10 years' time NAB has become a more profitable business that's grown over time, they've made more and more loans, they've opened new branches, they've acquired different other businesses, they've moved into different areas of finance, they've done all these things, I get to share in that growth in value. I get to share in that growth in profit over that next 10 years, compared to just lending them that money and capping what my upside is.
Absolutely, Dallas, and since the dawn of time, companies have been able to afford to pay that rate of interest.
That's a good point, and I think that's the point that I've sort of skipped over there, is that what you're talking about is that NAB aren't going to take that money off me and pay me more in interest than what they can use that money with.
Than what they can use that money for, value add. And when we talk about value add, it's probably pretty simple with the bank. They're taking money from lenders, and they're on-selling it. They're packaging that up as a home loan. Mm-hmm. They're packaging that up as a business loan. They're on-selling that to other people. They're an intermediary. They take deposits from one person. They on-sell it as a home loan to a second person. and they charge a premium to do that.
Yep.
So they pay 0.5% rate of interest, for example, and they on lend that at 3% rate of interest, and then they derive 2.5% towards their revenue, towards to meeting the cost of running the business. They've always been able to afford to do that.
Yep.
Since the dawn of time.
Yes.
So, and collectively,
And the point there is that if that business can't afford to do that, they broke.
they will go broke. And there's been countless
Yep.
stories of companies go broke, and that brings up risk. Risk can be minimised.
Yep.
And if we arrive at, just for example, the largest 1,500 companies in the world now, and we say, okay, for these 1,500 largest companies in the world to get there, plenty of companies have gone broke along the way, and then there's been some that have grown at extraordinary rates of profit, and there's been others that have grown at lower rates of profit, and some that have gone broke, and then the vast majority of them have grown at about the expected profit. Mm-hmm. That group of companies has always been able to afford to pay the rate of interest. What I'm getting at there is that the profits of those companies are growing at a much faster rate than the interest that they're paying to the lenders.
Yes.
So people have lent them money, and you may say, I'm not lending money to those companies.
You are.
You are. If you've got money in
Yeah.
an NAB account or a CBA account,
Yeah.
part of that money actually
Yeah.
goes towards lending
Yeah.
to companies.
Yes.
Companies have always been able to afford to pay the rate of interest collectively. We're not talking about individual companies here. We're talking collectively.
Yeah.
Those 1,500 companies, prime place to start as an example. What they've also been able to do is afford to pay the rents
Yes.
of the buildings that they operate out of. Some of them own some of their buildings. A lot of them decided a long time ago, like Woolworths, for example, hey, we're way better off actually selling the buildings that we own and the supermarkets that we own, the physical property, and putting and just paying
Rent.
and actually putting that money to a better use. So companies' profits, in terms of looking at that, I would much prefer to be an owner than a lender.
Yeah.
Because collectively speaking, I know that if history repeats, in the future, what will happen is the profit of those 1,500 companies, the largest 1,500 companies in the world, of which I'm certainly invested across, the profits of those companies will grow at a much faster rate than the rate of interest that they have to pay on any monies that they borrow.
Yeah.
It has to be that way.
Yes.
It cannot be any other way.
No, that's
Will there be volatility? Will there be times when the $1 million that I have spread across those companies have dropped to $700,000 on paper, or $630,000 on paper, or $600,000 on paper? Whereas if I lent the money to them, let's assume that $1 million hasn't dropped if I'm a lender, because they owe me $1 million. That doesn't fluctuate.
Yes.
They pay me a rate of interest. That's usually sort of set in stone. If I'm an owner, yes, there is that volatility there. However, what I know, if history repeats itself, I'm going to be far better off having that some money tied up being an owner of those companies as opposed to being a lender to those companies.
Yeah. And that's I'm just thinking as you're talking about that, the answer here, the answer of do I want to be an owner or a lender, the answer will be different for different buckets of money. And what I mean by that is, so for me, I'm 31. The money that I've got in my superannuation account, I can't touch it until I'm 60. So that has to stay there for 30 years. With the money that I've got in super, do I want to be an owner or a lender? I think it's very clear. I want to be an owner. It makes no sense to be a lender when I have 30 years of potential growth. So again, I can either lend that money to Woolworths via leaving it in a bank account or in term deposit or whatever. I can either lend it to Woolworths and they will pay me a guaranteed very low rate of return, or I can use that money to have it invested in Woolworths. And as Woolworths gets bigger, opens new stores, acquires other businesses, grows their profits over time, I get to take part of that growth for the next 30 years. So
that is a really good point, because what you were saying there is that you have no idea, and you would have no idea of knowing how that's going to pan out over 5 years.
No.
If the profits of Woolworths grow at a faster rate than the interest that they pay on their loans, over 5 years you have no idea.
Yep.
Over 30 years,
Yep.
you're very, very confident that the profits of Woolworths have grown at a far higher rate than the interest that they've paid on their loans.
And just to clarify there, I actually don't know whether Woolworths' profits will grow over 30 years. What I do know is that if I spread my money out across the biggest 200 companies in Australia, one of which is Woolworths, the majority of those companies, or the average of that, will be growth. It won't. It's not to say that I know that Woolworths or NAB or whichever company, I don't know what they're going to do in 30 years, but I know that on average those companies, those productive enterprises, are going to be more valuable than they are now. Yeah. And where I was talking about the different buckets of money is that the money that I've got in my NAB bank account, that when I buy groceries on the way home, that money, I do want it just sitting in the bank. I want to be a lender for that money. I can't go to the shops this afternoon and pay for my groceries with my NAB shares. That doesn't work. I have to use the money. I have to use the money that I've lent to NAB that's sitting in my transaction account. I have to use that to pay for groceries. Yep. I think where people get confused here is that you really, definitely the money that you're using, it can't be invested. You can't use your shares in these great companies to buy groceries this afternoon. But generally, what you need, the money that you need to be using to be an owner, is a far higher percentage of your net worth than the money that you want to use as a lender. So what I mean by that is, if you're retiring and you've got $1.5 million in your pension account, in your super income stream, most people's instinct is to go, I don't want that money to fluctuate. I've got $1.5 there. I'll lend that. I'll lend the whole lot out, and so I'll get a guaranteed 0.5% return on that. But I don't have to worry about that balance going up and going down. Now, I don't need all of that $1.5 million next week. I just need, I need $1,000 or I need $1,200 or whatever to live for that next week. So what we're really looking at here is, when you're looking at what you do with your money, your money that you earn money, you spend some of it, you've got some left over. That's really the decision of, with this amount of money that I have here, with this bucket of money, do I want to be an owner or a lender, knowing that on average the owner will have higher growth over the long term than the lender. And so if I have money that I want to grow over the long term, I really need to be an owner in those businesses rather than lending to those businesses. And
I think that decision is easier than it's ever been right now. So we're recording this in late January 2021. So at this present point in time, interest rates are certainly under 0.5%. I saw the $1 million NAB term deposit wholesale rate the other day. For 12 months, it was 0.4%. That came through as the wholesale term deposit rate. Yeah. For $1 million sum to lock away for 12 months. So let's just call it 1% and under that you're going to get from being a lender at this point in time. And there's other ways to lend, of course. Be a bond holder for governments and companies and so forth. But we're talking about the accepted no risk, low risk way of being a lender. That rate at the moment is under 1%. So the decision, I think, is easier for people. Going back to the global financial crisis, being a lender could yield you 5-6% at a point in time, 5%, 6% interest rates at that point in time. Was an easier decision for people to just have that money sat in a term deposit, either inside or outside of their superannuation fund. They were picking up somewhere between 5 and 6% rate of return. Right now, we're talking under 1%, and that's just not going to get it done for 99.9% of retirees. It's just, they're just going to plough through their money far too quickly. Like we used the example in a previous podcast: $2 million of retirement savings, 0.5% rate of interest. Your $2 million is only working casually for you. There's nothing wrong with working at McDonald's. Working casually for you at McDonald's at $2 million, it's earning you $10,000 of interest over the next 12 months when you're likely to spend as a retiree somewhere in the vicinity of $80,000 of that money. It's making you 10, you're spending 80, you're on the back foot straight away.
And that's, I guess, a point is the first part is to think of it as what it really is. So don't think, should I have that money in a bank account, or should I, buy shares with that money? Really make it tangible as, do I want to lend this money to businesses, or do I want to own businesses? Because that is your only two options. And then the second part of it is, it's not just what do I want to do, it's what do I actually need to do. Even if I want to be a lender, for most people you cannot afford to do that. And we've done recent podcasts about it, as you just touched on there, is that it's sort of a rhetorical question, because if I said to a person coming to see me with $1.5 million in super, who wanted to retire and draw $80,000 a year out of there, if I said to them, do you want to be an owner or a lender, and they said a lender, I'd go, trick question. You can't be a lender anyway. You have to be an owner. So
Look, that's a really good point to make. Everyone conceptually wants zero risk and zero fluctuation of return, but the ability to take $80,000 a year without running out of money. They don't want to run out of money. They don't want any volatility. That doesn't exist, and it certainly doesn't exist right now. I liked your point there before. It's not just what you want; it's what you need to do. And for 99.9% of people that are either retired now or looking to retire, what they need to accept if they're going to draw the average rate of income that we see, which is about $80,000 a year in retirement, and they're going to and costs go up, of course, over time, and one of that member of the couple is going to live for at least 25, if not 30 years of retirement. What they need to be is they need to have a very, very high proportion of their retirement savings being an owner as opposed to being a lender.
Yeah. I think that's a great place to wrap up. We've gone from the dawn of time to retiring in 2021 with a superannuation balance. So we've really taken a real journey throughout history.
A good one. We have. And just a quick reference to the shocking risk of term deposits. It's another good one that ties in well with this podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Money Over 50 podcast with Money Over 50 Financial Advisors. We look forward to catching up again soon.